There was this one afternoon. An afternoon that so many of us remember with this weird, haunting clarity. And it's not because anything incredible happened. Actually, it's the total opposite. It's memorable because it was so normal. Just a regular afternoon in a regular place with someone you loved. The very last time everything was okay. And that memory, it almost always brings up a single, really unnerving question. Right when it was happening, on some level that's way deeper than thoughts, deeper than words, did some part of you already know? I mean, not consciously, of course, but was there some quiet, hidden part of your awareness that knew this totally ordinary moment was actually the end of everything as you knew it? And what's wild is that millions of us share this exact kind of memory, but we almost never talk about it. It's this memory of the last time things were good, the last time things were normal, even though we had absolutely no clue at the time. Think about it. For you, maybe it was your grandmother telling you that story you'd already heard 100 times. Or maybe it was your dad, just sitting there, quietly watching TV. Or maybe it was just a quick phone call, one you rushed through because, you had stuff to do. An afternoon that meant nothing at the time, but later it became everything. It turned into this permanent, high-definition photograph of that person right before your world changed for good. But see, when you play that memory back, there's a feeling that goes way beyond just being sad. It's more unsettling than that. It's this question that just hangs there, right under the surface. Why that afternoon? Out of all the thousands of moments you shared, why did your brain decide to save that one with such perfect, vivid detail when you had no idea it was going to be the last? Well, it turns out this feeling, this whole experience, it's not rare at all. In fact, some studies show it's incredibly common. 36%. Just let that number sink in. That's not some tiny fringe group of people. That's more than a third of us. A massive number of people are going through something that, for a really long time, science has just kind of struggled to explain. And get this, where that number comes from is pretty incredible. It's from a study led by a psychologist named Richard Wiseman, who's actually famous for being a skeptic, for debunking paranormal stuff. He basically set out to prove these experiences weren't real. But instead, what he found was that over a third of the people he surveyed in the UK said they'd had some kind of unexplainable feeling right before a loved one passed away or got really sick. Okay, so of course, science has a go-to explanation for this, right? It's called reconstructive memory, and it's a very real thing. It's the idea that our brains, after something big and traumatic happens, go back in time and kind of edit our memories to make the story make more sense. We basically tell ourselves we saw the signs all along because it helps us feel a sense of order in all the chaos. And yeah, psychologists have shown this happens all the time. But here's the thing. That theory is totally valid, and it explains a lot. But does it really explain everything? Does it explain how specific these feelings can be, how physical they are? Is it possible that there's something else going on here? Something that our standard ideas about memory just don't fully cover? So, to get around the problem of our tricky, unreliable memories, some scientists tried something totally different. They decided to sidestep the mind completely. They started asking a new question. What does the body know? And more importantly, when does it know it? And this is where the work of psychophysiologist Dean Radin comes in. His team's idea was just brilliant. Instead of asking people what they remembered feeling, which is always going to be biased, they decided to measure the body's direct physical reactions as they happened. They wanted to see if the body could actually react to something before the conscious mind even knew what was coming. So here's what they did. They'd hook people up to sensors that measure how much their skin sweats when they're stressed, kind of like a lie detector test. Then a computer would randomly show them one of two types of images. Either something totally neutral, like a picture of a bowl of fruit, or something really intense and emotional, like a photo of a shark attacking. And the whole question was, would the body react to the scary picture before it even popped up on the screen? And the results? Well, they were just staggering. The answer was yes. Consistently, people's nervous systems showed a clear, measurable stress response, anywhere from 2 to 10 seconds before the emotional image appeared. Not after it appeared, before. It was as if the body, somehow, already knew what was about to happen. Now, before you think this is some fringe stuff, it's really important to know where this research was published. We're not talking about some obscure blog. These studies were published in serious, peer-reviewed scientific journals like Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, and other independent labs have replicated the findings. Now, critics will correctly say that the effect itself is small, statistically. But here's the crucial part. it's consistent, it's repeatable, and it's real. So, if we have data that suggests our bodies can literally anticipate emotional events a few seconds into the future, it just blows open a much, much bigger question. What kind of theory could possibly explain how that works? And this leads us to a really fascinating idea about what the mind even is. So, look at this. On the left, you have the standard view. It's what most of us are taught. The mind is basically the software running on the hardware of your brain, and it's locked inside your skull. But on the right, you have a theory called the extended mind, and it argues that the mind isn't a thing at all, it's a process. And it's a process that extends out beyond our brain into our tools, our phones, and most importantly, into our relationships with other people. I mean, just think about what this really means for the people we're closest to. If this theory is right, our connection to them isn't just some poetic metaphor. After years and years of shared memories, inside jokes, and finishing each other's sentences, our minds literally extend to include them. They become a real functional part of our own thinking system. So if the mind of someone we love is truly a part of our own extended mind, what happens when that part of our system starts to fail, when it begins to shut down? Well, maybe something deep inside us registers it. It wouldn't show up as a clear thought, like a text message. It would feel more like a glitch, a deep, weird disturbance in a system we rely on every second. A quiet little alarm going off in a distant part of our own consciousness. Okay, so this brings us to what's probably the most important part of all of this. If these signals, these little disturbances, are actually real, what do they feel like? And, what are we supposed to do about them? It's really all about learning to listen to a quiet language that most of us were taught to just ignore. Researchers have looked at thousands of these stories, and they found these really consistent patterns for how these feelings show up. They're like little whispers. It could be an incredibly vivid dream about the person, where they feel more real than when they're actually with you, or a sudden thought about them that just pops into your head and will not go away. Maybe it's a physical feeling, like anxiety or restlessness for no reason at all, or just this powerful, totally illogical urge to pick up the phone and call them right now. And it turns out that listening to those urges can be incredibly important. The research shows that when people actually act on these feelings, the result is, well, it's pretty remarkable. 83%, that's the number you really need to remember from all this. So here's what that number means. In one study, a researcher found that when a person's feeling was so intense that they actually did something about it, they made that phone call, they booked that flight, 83% of the time, they made contact with their loved one in their final days, sometimes even their final hours. For so many of them, it was the very last chance they got. And that just changes the whole story, doesn't it? It suggests that maybe the biggest tragedy isn't always the loss itself. I mean, that's inevitable for all of us. Maybe the deepest pain comes from the regret of not listening. The pain of looking back and realizing that your own mind, your own body was trying to tell you something important, but you'd been trained your whole life to dismiss those signals as just random noise or coincidence. Look, the point of paying attention to these little whispers isn't about trying to prevent what's going to happen. It's not about becoming psychic. The real goal is so much more practical and so much more beautiful. It's about using these little nudges from your own system as a reminder to just stop what you're doing, to reach out, and to appreciate the connections that you're lucky enough to have right here, right now. So let's go back to that one afternoon, the one your mind saved. The science can't tell us for sure why that happened, not yet anyway, but it does open the door to this incredible possibility that maybe that memory wasn't saved after the fact. Maybe it was saved as it was happening, because some deep part of you already knew you were going to need to have it later. Which leaves us with one last, pretty urgent question. What ordinary, forgettable afternoon are you living through right now that years from now could become the one you remember most?